Gentlemen, thank you. Thank you for joining the session. It is our last session for the day, and I have the pleasure of facilitating this session. So thanks to you for being here, and thanks to our panelists for joining us. This session is about inclusive green financing for employment creation. And what we're really seeking to tap into, we've had conversations yesterday about how South Africa is really vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. And the need for investment is extremely significant, both locally and internationally, for the economy to transition. There's a huge element that needs to be discussed, though, which is also about making sure that we are intentional about not entrenching the divide and not entrenching the inequalities that currently exist within the structure of the economy. So what we'd really like to focus on in this event is to highlight some of the key gaps in the green financing landscape, which includes inclusivity and also the gaps that restrict growth for jobs. But then we also want to look at what are some of the solutions and some of the case studies that are existing and some of the things that have been done. They say that business as usual doesn't work. We can't create solutions with the same minds that created the problems. We need to think differently. And so what we'd like to explore today is how do we think differently about green financing, specifically and particularly for township-based or informal SMEs to access finance to enable creation or job creation within the informal sector and the SME space, specifically the township SME space. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Abigail Kuluse, and I'm from the NBI in the Economic Inclusion Unit. And I'm joined by my panelists to discuss the session, and I'll briefly introduce the panelists to you and thereafter hand over to them. We have Lwandle sitting on the far left. Lwandle is from the IDC, Lwandle Mqadi, and she is the Principal Specialist in Sustainability, ESRG, and Impact. And then we have Justin Schmidt, and Justin, I made sure that I get their titles correct. And Justin is the Sector Head for Manufacturing, Renewable Energy, Transport and Logistics from Absa Bank. And lastly, we have Ritumetsi Molotsane, who is the Head of Environment and Society at the NBI. The panelists have been, thank you, you're getting a cheers or an applaud there. And the panelists have been carefully selected because of the role that they currently play in driving innovative solutions within their spaces, solutions that do seek to solve this very problem of inclusivity. I'd like to start off with you, Lwandle. If you can please give us your opening remarks, and perhaps in your opening remarks, touch on what the structure of the financial landscape is and the context in which SMEs find themselves in the South African space.
Thanks, Abigail, and thanks for the invite. I'm from the Industrial Development Corporation. As you would know, our mandate is sustainable industrial development. So that's what we focus on. We focus in specific sectors and value chains, sectors and value chains. And when it comes to issues around inclusion, we've had to learn a lot over the years. As you would know, we would have our mainstream part of the corporation where we would take equity and where we'll find just on debt. But also as part of the IDC, we've got a big, what we refer to as program management portfolio, where we are managing about between 28 and 30 social funds, specifically designed to focus on the issues of social inclusion. We've got funds ranging from the township economy. We've had to ask ourselves, what is a township in the context of South Africa and Southern Africa? And if we were to engage in township issues, how would we structure a fund directed to that? We have funds directed to the youth. We've got funds directed to a range of issues which we've identified as key in driving impact in South Africa, Southern Africa, and the rest of the continent. So I'll start by giving that overview. That's what we've had to do. I must mention that we have not been able to do this alone. I don't think we'll be able to do this alone. As some of you would know, whenever we introduce a new fund or we put out a call, it's always around financial intermediaries. We've had to structure a range of ways to actually reach the people who want to reach on the ground. So for us, we've relied a lot on financial intermediaries. We've had to be very innovative in identifying partners to help us reach our targeted audience. You'd be familiar also with the fact that we are managing the Social Employment Fund for the country. Again, that's where we've had to learn on the types of partners we want to bring on board. And most of these partners, they're in various sectors, ranging from the health sector to the water sector. It's quite a spectrum. And those intermediaries, they're the ones teaching us, we're learning from them, and they're the ones basically defining how we are managing the funds that we have within the corporation. So I'll leave it there for now and come back later for more.
Thank you, Bandle. Justin, over to you. If you can please give us your opening remarks and in particular also respond on what your opinion is in terms of the inclusion of township-based small informal SMEs in the financial sector, particularly private sector response.
Thanks, Abby. So Justin Schmidt, as you said, I look after manufacturing, transport, and renewables. I think as a bank, we decided to focus on the green economy and renewables about 8 years ago. We could see that, this was a changing industry. It was quite small then, and it wasn't just about REAP. There were a lot of farmers, a lot of businesses starting to invest into energy. And we kind of fast forward 8 years forward, and we see this is quite a mature industry. There's a lot of job creation. But what we haven't cracked is the township economy and how we support the installers that are there. How do we train them? And I think that's the work we're doing together. So for me, just looking at all of this, we start with kind of create a sector focus. And for us, in all three of these sectors, I think there's really good opportunities. I think as a bank as well, we've said, well, we're good at the commercial, we're good at the big lending deals, but let's create the structure and the value propositions to support SME business. So as a bank, we've also said, well, SMEs are key to our vision going forward. And in my sectors in particular, where you say, what are we doing for SMEs? Well, about 70% of the two, manufacturing and transport logistics, are SME. So we have a lot of SMEs in our base. But what we are grappling with is to kind of make sure we do more for these SMEs, focus a lot more, and understand they have working capital needs. Simple things like that we make sure that when we lend, we can kind of bring in mechanisms that de-risk these transactions at a portfolio level and support them. And getting into those markets as well. I think it's easy for us sitting in Sandton or sitting in Cape Town kind of saying this is what our clients need, but we need that diversity of opinions to build into what we are doing for the industry. So I think kind of it is top of our radar. We are looking at the township economy. We do focus on SMEs, but I think we've got a lot more work to do to make sure that we enable those communities to thrive. I think you mentioned earlier what is kind of holding in what the issues facing industry. I think for us, looking at renewables and looking at manufacturing, we kind of see that load shedding is this massive issue for all business, right? But there's also the increasing energy costs. So how do we get into those economies and say, well, can we enable you to produce your own power, to have power, so that you can continue manufacturing, continue with your operations. The spaza shop is, you're not losing kind of your product, essentially. But also what's important is eventually load shedding is gone. There's a cost implication. So I think bringing the same principles we do to the commercial businesses, but just getting into those areas and supporting. Um, yeah, I'll also pause there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Justin. Ritumetse, I'd like you to go next, please. And in your opening remarks, and maybe just to give our audience a bit of background, Ritumetse has also been, the NBI led by, in the environmental space led by Ritumetse, has also been the implementing partner for the Climate Finance Accelerator. And I'd like you to also reflect on what some of the learnings have been, particularly with response. Is that my mic or the mic next door? Particularly with regards to inclusivity and making sure that we are able to reach the SMEs in the CFA. Ritumetse, over to you.
So thank you very much, Abigail, and again for the opportunity to discuss something that is really important and topical. I think we've had several discussions and presentations around the just transition in South Africa, and the group that we are focusing on in this topic is an important part of making that transition happen, and for which the necessary channels, the necessary tools, the necessary processes need to be put in place so that they have agency as well as access to key resources like finance. So just in terms of reflecting on the Climate Finance Accelerator South Africa, and it's a program that's implemented across, I think, 10 different countries, and it's funded by the UK government. So it focuses more on the technical assistance to SMMEs and other organizations that are trying to access climate finance. It can be quite a complex space. So this support is really there to make sure that we see more and more organizations, more and more SMMEs being present in the space. So it's really provided us with an excellent window into what is happening in South Africa. There are obviously those projects that have been selected through the 2 cycles that we've implemented thus far. And I just kept on hand a few notes just in terms of the size of the interest and the size of the opportunity and the potential sitting there. So, in the 2 cycles that have been implemented in South Africa, the value has been over $50 billion US. That's the value being sought, organizations, SMMEs that have come through with a viable value proposition that are seeking funding. And of those that we have worked with over the past 2 or so years, they've been able to access about $85 million US in terms of funding. So that's what the process has enabled. So there are wonderful success stories, and some of the colleagues on the panel with me have participated in this initiative that provides technical assistance by really building the capacity of SMMEs and others to be able to access finance. But what was also notable in that lesson was perhaps the other 400 proposals that were submitted. So in many of these where you had very, very good value proposition, you had a good business, they were coming from SMMEs that had been in existence or could offer something, but the main limiting factor that we saw in their ability to participate further was that the projects were too small, the ask was too small. And I think that is very typical of your township SMMEs. It's part of an invisible segment of our economy, but it's really representative of a huge section of our population, and also speaks to perhaps the misalignment. You can hear from the previous speakers reflecting on how the financial sector is changing, is being more responsive to a group that has been invisible in the past, but really noting that we are not there yet. So in addition to this issue of the ticket size being too small to really capture the interest on a systematic level, there are other challenges that we need to be able to address, and I think the just transition conversation is a good setting. We're seeing opportunities from a financing perspective enter at a very high level. So it's big funds, it's big kind of partnerships and so forth. But it's clear that we have not yet built the ecosystem that can consistently and really sustainably over the period of time that we need to be addressing this transition, deliver some of those big opportunities that are set to really focus on issues of transition to those who need to have the agency to make the decisions, not just be beneficiaries of the decisions of others, but to have the types of products and services available to them to then pivot and participate in some of these growing economic sectors. So perhaps just for opening remarks, just to leave it at that for now.
Thank you, Ritu. And that's certainly the feedback that we are also getting from the SMEs that we work with. A lot of it is very much about, I'm in an early stage and I don't know where to go for finance. I've been told my ticket size is just too small. So perhaps to just pose a question to yourself, Lwandle and Justin, on what would it take to actually service the small ticket items? What are some of the innovative things that maybe you have been thinking about, if any, or what's industry's take on it?
Okay, yes, so ticket sizes being too small, I'm not sure about that because, if it's buying a delivery vehicle or, getting working capital facilities, we do look at a lot of that. I think for us, it's how do we make the decision-making easier to make sure whoever's looking at this client understands kind of what their need is, the various financial solutions they need, and support them there. And also banking's not just lending to the clients, it's also all the other products that can enable them. So I understand the ticket size point, but I think that's why we exist as well, to service SME clients, to make sure that we can graduate them through the various life cycles and move them on. And I think that's why I did mention something like working capital, because if you need to be buying products as a manufacturer, you need to make sure that you're not just using the cash that's sitting there waiting for a deposit for your next machine. We enable that cycle. So a lot of work happens on that side. We make sure that our colleagues have the tools available to quantify the need and get that into credit. We score digitally. So it's all about kind of the volume and making sure we understand the data behind them. I think what we can do to crowd in more funding is we've just gone live with the Bounce Back Energy Scheme today. The other banks have also launched. But where Treasury and SARB have come in and said, well, we'll offer a guarantee against the portfolio of lending at its preferential concessionary funding rates, but having that guarantee in the background, enables you to not need as much collateral. And I think that's key in the SME market, that there isn't collateral available for these small township entrepreneurs. So as a bank, how do we work with partners to create those guarantees? We also have an enterprise development team. They have alternative lending where they also have guarantees to enable that collateral. Having said that, though, I don't think the solution is figuring out collateral. I think it's figuring out how to finance the cash flow of this SME, which is maybe, it's not as predictable as you would want compared to bigger projects. And I think also just another opportunity we have as corporates is unlocking our value chains, access to markets. If it's the installer of solar water heating, how do we make sure that through our insurance channels we plug them in to create markets for them? And I think as a bank, when we know there's more predictable cash flow, well, it becomes easier to lend to them. Thanks.
I think Justin has already touched. I don't know whether. I think Justin has touched on it already. No one ever talks about the partnerships that we have. I'm from a development finance institution and it's from a bank. Yeah. And people normally think we're in competition. Actually, we're not. They would call on us to go in and de-risk situations. Hello, there you go. Okay, technology. So let me try and repeat what I've just said, is that I'm from a development finance institution and Justin is from a bank. We are a bank, but we're a development finance institution more than anything. And we never talk much about the partnerships that we've had to formulate, the partnerships between development finance institution and the actual banks. They normally call on us to go and de-risk these opportunities. Again, I'll agree with you, it's not about the ticket size, it's about the structuring and behind the scenes on how we actually engage with these SMMEs. So, for example, some of the work that we've had, some of the clients we've had to engage with through our intermediaries, you'll find that they're already engaging ABSA, Standard Bank, Nedbank, or one of the 4 big banks in South Africa. But they'll come to us when it comes to technology. You'll find that some of these, to actually see whether we can assist them at with pre-feasibility studies, with feasibility studies, and also engage them with partners that they would like to, drive their small businesses with, be it off takers and all of that. So I think when we sit from the outside, we think businesses are straightforward. Of course, there are those businesses which are straightforward, but with the sectors and the value chains that we are targeting, there's a lot of partnerships that happen in the background to actually ensure that businesses are able to grow over time to even get to the scale that you're referring to. So I think for me, what I'd like to highlight is the role of DFIs in this space in assisting these kind of clients in de-risking these opportunities and ensuring that the right partnerships are in place so that you're at a level to actually engage with some of the products and tools that the banks will be able to offer you, be it in the insurance space, be it in other products that the banks will offer you. So for us, it's that. Also the innovation around the structuring of those businesses out there. I think what we've had to learn is that the innovation happens, it happens every day. And we've had to learn from our clients around that innovation. So the innovation, not just innovation in terms of technology, but innovation in the type of businesses that are being offered. And that talks to the type of structures that clients are formulating now with communities where they operate, with the partners in the space in which the competition is there, but there's partnership as part of that. So for me, I would like to highlight the de-risking that they've had to call us in to come in and do. They've called us to come in and help with the de-risking of opportunities, but also it's been about these clients saying to us, help us to be innovative in the type of partnerships that we can formulate within the sectors and the industries that we want to engage on. So those are some of the 2 things that I wanted. And then there's a big thing, I think, from a DFI perspective, I'm sure you are from a banking sector that you are now engaging on. Whilst we're doing all of this work, remember we can be a fund manager and there's an investor behind us. There's a big element of monitoring, evaluation, and reporting that we have to do. We've seen a lot of that playing, that influencing the type of clients that we are formulating. And I'm mentioning this because it's linked to your opening statement around driving the green economy, inclusions, and all of that. So a lot of our investors, you'll find that they'll say, for this fund, our priority is the transition and it's about social inclusion. And as a DFI, we've had to ask ourselves, what does that mean at that level, at SMME level? What does social inclusion? At that level, it's very difficult to account for greenhouse gases, for all these things that we're discussing here at the COP around green economy, without climate change and all of that. But it's all about what are the elements that the small business will drive for us to be able to say it's contributing to this bigger picture of the just transition, and how do we actually report and ensure that we assist them in scaling up that. So those are some of the elements I wanted to add to what you've just said. Yeah.
Sure, Lwandle, you touch on a lot of things and very key and critical things. And there are a number of questions that I'd like to pose. But before I go there, maybe I can ask Ritu to comment on one of the things that Lwandle mentioned is really about the technical assistance, or the importance of technical assistance that's required in the structuring of the deals. And I think that's one of the learnings from the CFA as well, that how the deal is actually structured and the actual business model and the financial model behind it. Perhaps maybe you can give us some of those learnings.
Sure, thanks, Abigail. I think just, in responding, and as I mentioned earlier, that the CFA for us is a very useful window into what can be successful, but also understanding the journey that those who are not successful would also need to focus on. And it does focus on technical assistance and on a number of different areas. So, of course, the viability and the value proposition of the venture itself, the SMME, is critical, and that's a big part of what we do. So looking at some of the support around the financial aspects of the project. I think the other important thing about that aspect, and specifically because we are sitting with a strong financial team here on the panel, is the involvement of the financial sector in working very closely with those SMMEs that have gone through the process of the CFA, to understand and to make sure that the alignment in terms of how you're presenting, how the businesses are being positioned, that there's a meeting of minds, we're using the same language. And I think there's obviously a value that is given to the business, improving whatever your pitch, just making sure that the robustness of what you're communicating from a financial perspective is there. But on the other hand, just in terms of having, again, a window into how South Africa is innovating, what business models are being presented, that are working, because in the CFA in particular, the size of the proposition is quite good, and we work with initiatives that have gone beyond pre-feasibility at least. So there's something there that's been demonstrated and something to engage with. But this bringing together of your SMMEs as well as the financial sector, and it's a range, so it's not just the commercial banking, it's not just the development institutions, but it's also looking at other actors who can come in different ways. So looking at equity, for example, amongst others. And that also starts to, in some ways, build that ecosystem from a financial sector. What are all these various interventions and the kinds of partnerships and collaborations that you can have that can lead to the scaling up of good ideas, of innovative ventures that are being led by SMEs. So I think that's one of the big parts, making sure that the financial sector is involved in kind of working directly, and I think Londle also mentioned a little bit of this, working directly with those that we want to see accessing finance, scaling up, and there is an exchange there that's happening that is, it's extremely valuable. So we've had 2 in-country events where we've been joined by, I think, the majority of our key financial sector actors, definitely in commercial banking, but a range of others, small, large entities, and just having that space to very critically look at the innovations and the initiatives that are being put out there, I think has immense value on a number of different levels, from the technical, but from building the understanding, building, giving insight into how the space is evolving, and the quality of the projects that have come out of the CFA, in particular in the South African space, have been of really high quality. So, we've been able to then participate in global CFAs where projects are selected across different and quite big developing economies. So it could be Mexico, Nigeria, Turkey, and have featured very, very well because of the additional technical support that has been very hands-on and provided by the financial sector. I would also add that in addition to that aspect, with the CFA program in particular, we're looking at those key things around gender, equity, and inclusion. So that's built into what makes a project, successful, and being very deliberate about how those businesses are actually positioned and how they consider these aspects. And of course, the climate change component is built into it. And the capacity building focuses on all of these different kind of aspects of really in the world that we would like to see in the future that is sustainable, that is competitive. It includes all of these aspects, and how do we ensure that the SMEs that we're working with have a very good sense of that. And so bringing in that whole ecosystem around working quite reflectively and being very interactive in building and being quite collaborative in building those initiatives, I think is a wonderful part of what the CFA South Africa seeks to achieve. And it's been quite a pleasure to see that in motion.
Yeah. And Ritu, how would you say we can scale that? So, and when I say scale, and particularly returning back to the question on, or the challenge on the ticket sizes, is it feasible to reach the smaller ticket sizes to drive inclusivity?
I think we have to be deliberate. So you've got an initiative, and this one has a very specific ticket size threshold for participation. And we don't see, particularly from a climate perspective and a greening perspective, many other initiatives that are focused on building that capacity, but for the smaller initiatives and the smaller businesses. So we do have to be deliberate about plugging the gaps in the ecosystem. I mentioned right at the beginning, I think from that kind of macro level, we do have, you've got climate funds, for example, that the country can access, and various other opportunities. Lwanda has referenced those as well. You've got the banks playing a role, but at a specific level. We have to be deliberate as part of this transition in building the facilities and the mechanisms that target your township economies, that give them an insight into what opportunities are sitting in the green space, in responding to the mitigation challenge that we see, in making sure that we are resilient as a country. There are many opportunities, and I think just referencing very briefly in this session some of the work that we are doing across our 2 units. So looking at how we can use the extensive base that NBI has in the economic inclusion work to bring in these aspects around the greening of the economy, of building resilience, and then to match that as far as possible with the existing opportunities that are sitting in the ecosystem, but just making sure that we bridge that gap so that they can get into the CFAs and then grow into other initiatives as well.
I wanted to jump in just to give you an example of what Eric Dumit is referring to. We've got a very brilliant case study. I'll call it a case study, but it's an investment that we've had to make in the Eastern Cape. It's called Bulungula Backpackers. It's in the Eastern Cape. It's such a classic example of how it's an ecotourism, what we'll refer to as an ecotourism investment, where you've got this community where they've had to sit back and think about the structure that they want to formulate to actually access funds. So the ownership of this whole business, we've had to spend time with them, and they've said, they've come up to us and said, do you want to take an equity stake in this? We are looking for partners in ensuring this ecotourism project is successful. So in terms of ownership, they've been very deliberate in ensuring that the structure which owns the business has got all the elements that development finance or even banks will be looking for. And for them also, it's a risk element, it's a risk mitigating element. That's in the structure. But in terms of the initiatives that they've had to actually integrate as part of formulating this program, it ranges from renewable energy that is running this backpackers to the construction. They were looking at how the buildings are actually certified as green buildings at this level. And then the cars that they actually use to actually pick you up at the airport, at the nearest airport, to bring you to this backpackers. It's an electric vehicle. So they've been very deliberate in ensuring this backpackers ticks all the boxes. In a normal instance, the scale, you'll say, is just too small. But we've had to take a step back and say, actually, the scale, it's small, but it can grow to something else. But for us also, it's been about learning new structures, community-owned structures, as normally call them community trusts, but it's not actually what you would call a community trust in terms of ownership, because it's very innovative. It's got other elements that they've got. I mean, if you look at the car that they have, the renewable energy that's being generated, the ownership, it's different. It's owned by different people, but there's this entity or this SPV that they've had to create to be able to access these different funds, be it climate funds, be it social employment funds, be it inclusion funds, but it has all those elements in it. And this is just a backpacker. And you are seeing a lot of those coming through and asking us to help them structure these businesses and actually ensure that they're able to participate in what reduces some of the programs that you have, which the different governments are bringing to South Africa. And it can even take the box of the just transition because it has the renewable energy element in it. It has a water element, water efficiency element. I mean, the waste elements are there. The employment is there. The training is there. The skills is there. All of these technologies in this backpack is there's some form of reskilling or skilling that is being offered by this business, and that's just one of the investments that we've made. And I'm sure you've also heard of Melovens, and they've been in various platforms here where we got into this business at pre-feasibility stage. Now they're a very successful business. But if you listen into the structures that they've had to create, the kind of the employment element in it, because as the IDC jobs are very important, it's one of the key impact indicators that we drive in all the investments that we make. The jobs, the type of job that is the support that job is going to be. If a job is created, what support do you require to ensure that that job is sustainable? So if you look at Melovens these days, it's based in Stellenbosch. It's employing a number of young engineers, and the whole technology, and I'll refer to it as a technology, it's a South African technology, and it's being run in Stellenbosch. And those are the kind of things that are coming out of the investments that we're seeing at the moment. Yeah.
Thanks, Lwandle. Those are really great case studies. So, and I'm wondering, how do we replicate that? Justin, maybe, are we doing enough to unearth that innovation, to unearth, the original green solutions that are coming out of the township and the informal sector? Are we doing enough to unearth them to the point where we can actually unearth, support, and fund?
Well, the fact that we're talking about it, I suppose we're not doing enough. But that's the great part of like SEZs, in South Africa, where we have these special economic zones, whether it's for automotive, whether it's Atlantis, where there's an area where it's focused on a specific subsector or specific value chain. And I think that brings all of us together to say, well, how does the DFI come in and support you? How do you have tax incentives? I think also we can create an environment where there is, a lot of these spaces where, you don't necessarily have to have the water, the energy, because like in the ecotourism space, a lot of them are off-grid straight away. And I think a lot of these areas where we can focus our efforts, come together as kind of multiple parties and create a conducive environment. So I don't think we're doing enough, but we see the automotive sector as a great success. I can't tell the stories of our clients as well as you, Lwandle, but you see a lot of those success stories, where there's the access to market, where these entrepreneurs are sitting in an area that doesn't get load shed, first of all. They have guaranteed offtake, and you see people graduating from SME to in our world growth businesses. And then like some of them have now got billion rand turnover, where, these were just small businesses at the start, and just, through the right channels, through the right kind of support mechanisms, and just really great entrepreneurs they've got there. So I do think focus is needed, like Ritmetsu said. We're not doing enough, but I think there's a lot of spaces, if we just get the focus there and understand what that area is good at, then we can deliver. We always talk with our enterprise development colleagues saying, we can try to be everything for everyone, or if we just focus in on the areas, so like in Mpumalanga, focusing in on those SEZs that we need to, I think that's where we'll make the biggest change. And I think, again, as a bank, not just the access to finance, we've got thousands of clients. If I think back to renewable energy, where, we look at, like this year, we've looked at more than 1,000 deals around the country. Our clients kind of ask us for that access to information. What are we seeing from similar companies? So I think we've got a role as corporate to say, well, these are the learnings we have. How do we speed up your journey? If you're a transporter going, a small transporter, how do we use the learnings we've used from the bigger transporter and say, this is your ESG journey, and it's not just the E, it's the S. These are the regulations you need to follow. These are the things you need to be successful. So I think that for me would be the goal for my teams, is that how do we enable that kind of journey to success through knowledge sharing. And then we always say there's access to funding. We've got enough of a balance sheet. We do have appetite. But how do we enable you to lend more from us?
That reminds me of something the prior speaker in the previous sessions mentioned, that, often we think we need to start from scratch, but actually we don't, because there's so many learnings that are transferable. Whilst it's still the green space, and green financing is pretty much a new concept as green financing, but there's lots of lessons that we can learn and transfer on, which then means we're not starting from scratch, and we can actually fast track the journey of seeing more SMEs accessing finance and growing their businesses for employment. Thank you for those reflections. I'd like to open the floor for questions. I think we've done a lot of talking, hey? So let's open the floor, and we have a number of hands. Would welcome your questions and comments. We've got a couple. So the lady in orange, you can start there. Thanks.
Thank you. My name is Unontle Mngadi. I am from South Africa. My question is around capacity building. I mean, you spoke about 400 businesses that didn't qualify because of scale. Was there a going back to ensure capacity building so that they're able to participate? Because that lacks a lot. And then my other question is around, do we have a baseline of understanding SMMEs that need support, so that we understand where are we in supporting, what's the scale of supporting that we are doing as a country? Because I'm scared sitting here coming from South Africa when I hear about such opportunities, but I know of many struggling businesses. So I'm wondering what is missing if you speak about there's so much funding that's there. What is it? Thank you.
Thank you. We can take the next question.
Thank you very much. I think on the same wavelength, I just wanted to check something. I also, I'm from South Africa, I work for government. We do go to communities and, we create awareness in terms of environmental education and all that. And all the time, people ask, how do you access funding? And the basic question that I normally ask most of the time is that when you go to funding institutions, the first question that they ask you is collateral. And you don't know what collateral is all about, That's where the problem lies. You write a good business plan, and you formulate your business outlay, and then when you come to financing institutions, they will tell you that we want a company that has been operating for the past year. Accessibility, which is a major problem that we experience in South Africa. As a result, there's quite a few of youth specifically who are disgruntled because they can't access financing. I mean, the lady spoke over there of we are talking about fuel efficiency, we're talking about waste management and talking about all those things, whereas to the men on the ground, they want to run a business that will also provide a positive impact on the green space. But the issue is about accessibility. Immediately when you say to me, I need a company that's been running for a year and my company has not been running for a year, what happens to me as the youth? The rate of unemployment in the country is about 42%, which is a problem. So what happens to the percentage of those businesses that when they apply for funding, you decline them? What happens to that percentage of those companies? Do you go businesses or SMME, do you go back to them and say, we want to put you in an incubation type of an exercise or system to allow you to grow, to say, yes, we understand this is not how you write a business plan. We know your vision, you've got actually good business and a vision, but the problem is that these are the areas that we can practically, not theoretically and talk theory and all those things, but practically on the ground to say, yes, a percentage of businesses that we've financed as an institution is about 30%. 60%, they're struggling. This is what we have done to assist those businesses, because those are the potential, employment creators for the country. So I just wanted to find out as to whether, do we have mechanisms to address that? Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll take the last one for this round. I will come back and do another round. I just don't want to take too many at a go. So let's take the third one.
Good afternoon. My name is Vivian from South Africa as well. I work for an incubation, so I'm from Indalo Inclusive. And I just wanted to comment, actually, not so much of a question, especially to hers and his questions in a way that, the problem is not that there's not support, like they've mentioned. The problem is more on how do people in the townships and rural communities access information. So that's what we find out as we do work on the ground, that we come and say, there's an opportunity for funding and for an incubation capacity building, but how do people actually access those opportunities? Because a lot of them are in rural communities, don't really have much access to, they have smartphones, yes, but network data and all those things. But we've realized that through on-the-ground partnerships, like if you work with organizations on the ground, then it's easier if you have a call for applications for a program to actually access those SMMEs, and that's how they can access those opportunities. So I think it's more on having community-based, or rural-based organizations that can help with making sure that those small businesses actually access the information. Yeah, I just wanted to comment on that.
Thank you. Thank you for that comment. I see you ready. Go ahead.
Can I take a baseline?
Please, you can reflect on the questions that have been asked.
Yeah, so I think maybe just I want to take the baselining question because of the work we've done. In the energy space, where there's been a lot of deregulation of the industry, which is a great thing, there's also a need for skills, there's a need to follow the right principles and ensure that when you build a solar installation, it is safe and reliable. So I think to talk to some of those SMEs in that space, a lot of the work we've done with the MDI is to go into the IRMs and facilitate the training. So we sponsor the PV Green Card as an institution, but we've also gone, I think last year there was 50, we aim for 100 SME clients to upskill them there. That's not enough that we're doing, but I think just in terms of if they need to then create access to markets, I think for us, we looked at it and said, well, what are the skill set that they need to enable them to build these installations? So I do think that baselining is important in any industry we're in. How do we get into those areas where we provide access to information? And I think that is key for us in our enterprise development world, in our SME world too. That's why I said that sharing of knowledge. Approvals are maybe not where they should be, but that's why if we get in there, we learn from these clients, we can fix whatever's not working. And I think that's what we constantly look at in these environments to say, okay, what have we done well, but where didn't we do something well and improve the value proposition? So I do think even as a corporate, it's how do we partner, how do we upskill those SMEs to say, these are the gaps you have. It's potentially accounting packages that we give you for free as part of our value proposition, those sorts of things, to enable you to come with the business plan. And I think sometimes it's worse, we say, give us 3 years financial statements for bigger commercials. Luckily in the SME world, we look at behavioral kind of models and we say, okay, here's how we can proactively support you.
Okay, we're not as sophisticated as the bank, so, and I think, thank you so much for that comment, because that's how I was going to respond to two of the questions that have been raised. As I said earlier on, and I'll give an example from the two funds that we manage, the Social Employment Fund, which is known, and the Township Economy Fund. Those two funds, I think you will never see our branding there, because we are not the ones in the rural communities, we're not the ones in the townships. However, our intermediaries, and be it a financial intermediary, be it an NGO, a CBO, they are the ones who will actually be interacting with us. And they will be the one engaging with the communities or the businesses that we want to engage, be it in the townships or in the rural communities. Of course, you'll always have those communities who've been able to pull themselves together into a certain structure that I refer earlier on. I was thinking of the Gubalele farming that a lot of you are familiar with in Mpumalanga. Though that community has been able to structure themselves in such a way they've been able to actually access the fund via one to our funds because of the way they've structured themselves as a community and the elements that they are driving within that community, from schools to food security, from a school to a food security, to the land that they've been able to buy together as a community. But that's a different thing. But in response to some of the questions that have been raised, I think the comment that has been made, access to information. And it's not just access to information, it's how that information is interpreted and used by those who need it, because somebody still needs to explain to that community. If you are trying to access a township, economy fund, for example, who is it directed to? Who should be accessing that fund? Am I the one who's supposed to access that fund, or somebody else should be accessing that fund and I should be partnering with that person? I'm just an electrician, based at Umlazi Township. How do I ensure that I access the township? Maybe I'm not the one who's supposed to access the township economy fund. Who is it in my community who's got access or who's been established actually for me to access that fund? So it's about access to information, and once you have that information, having a partner and you being aware of who's the partner who can assist in that regard. So from our side, as I said earlier on, we're a learning institution. DFIs are there to learn and de-risk opportunities so that our colleagues in the private sector can just come and take it up and actually start instilling some of the sophistication that you guys come up with. But for us, we've had to learn a lot from our intermediaries, who are basically in the coal face of the clients that would not necessarily have exposure to. Yeah. So for us, it's partnerships, it's intermediaries, and it's the right intermediaries, not just any intermediary. And everyone always assumes that we give money to financial intermediaries. You'll be surprised the kind of institutions, and I'm going to call them, doesn't matter, maybe it can be two ladies, but those institutions, they've had to learn a lot in terms of registrations and ensuring that their companies are registered. They're able to report on their they are able to do their tax declarations, CIPC registration, all of those things. And they've said they've come to us and say, we are a financial intermediary, and we would be able to actually distribute these funds on your behalf. So there's a lot of innovation that needs to happen also, that is happening, to ensure that those people who need the funds are able to have access to them. It's not a lot, it's work in progress, and I don't think, we still have a long way to go with this one, yeah.
We certainly do need a lot more de-risking. So to Sir's question, then we don't get the feedback, SMEs don't get the feedback that says, but you've never run a green business before, sorry, we can't fund you. So more de-risking, please. Ritu.
I think just to add to some of the the insights that have been shared. I mean, again, just isolating the CFA program specifically because it's focusing on this capacity building. So, in terms of what the program can do in one specific iteration, I mean, one can acknowledge that is limited. You work with a certain number of companies, so we work with a cohort, and we've worked with about 30 companies or so over maybe 15 to about 30 companies over the past few years. So what we have noticed, and that's also been a learning process, but what we've tried to do through that program is that for some of the SMMEs, they can't go through the whole capacity building initiative just because of, it's got limited numbers of places. But where we have opportunities to open up the capacity building on specific issues, on specific topics, that is one step to try and kind of broaden the community of people who've got access to information. This technical access support, it's not focused on finance, so it's not direct finance, but it's about providing that information that can empower and allow people to move into the right spaces so that they are kind of building up closer and closer, getting to the point, understanding what is required, understanding how to go about it. So I think that's one, it's a small intervention. I think what needs to be done is that needs to be implemented in a systematic way. So we understand that this is an issue that pops up over and over again. We are building an infrastructure to some degree on finance that's, building on your institutions that already exist, but it's within a specific context. So how do we use those partnerships? How do we use and understand where they are sitting and the journey that needs to be traveled by SMMEs all the way from the small SMME that's sitting in a township into your growth areas. And it's about definitely being deliberate about plugging the gaps, and we know that this one is a specific gap, and really putting in place the kind of programs that we want to see that can address that. So one of the other areas that we're doing, that we're working on now, is embedding the CFA. So we understand that this is support that comes from the UK government. It's a once-off initiative. But if you want to deliver the types of programs that you need to have in place, over the next 3 decades, this needs to be part of the infrastructure, the ecosystem that you have in place, and be quite deliberate about using those learnings, using the different positioning and the skills, the resources that different types of entities have to kind of join up all the dots, and progressively push through those different stages and steps, the different organizations, the SMMEs, the opportunities, and those who are seeking them, so that they can get to the kinds of big businesses you want to see in the future that are responsive to climate change and are really competitive.
Thank you.
The baseline question, there's as part of the Social Employment Fund, you've got those intermediaries who focus on the health sector. And we've had to learn from those intermediaries, because they'll tell you that I'm operating in the Eastern Cape, and as a starting point for me, it was to determine the baseline for that area. And by then, it's health services. Do we have clinics in that area? And if there's no clinics, people who need to basically get access to their medicine, how are they doing that? And we've had to rely on them to define those indicators for us. It's, once you call it I guess it's sophisticated what's on the other side, but on the other side, the person would say, how many people actually travel to Mthatha or Bisho to go and get medication? And how can we ensure those people don't need to travel as far as this? How do we ensure that we capacitate a school in a certain area, train a few people to be able to understand the medication that is required, look at the businesses that will be required, or some form of a financial institution that could be created so that people, jobs are created, or there's a skill that we can build in this area. And for us, I just wanted to give an example on how we are collecting some of the information in the for baseline. I mean, we're not involved in the health services sector, but we're finding ourselves in that space through the funding that we've brought in. So the health department is now able to actually develop some of the programs in that area based on this fund that we've created in that area. And as part of that information and data that we require to actually intervene into a community, now it's all of a sudden readily available. So those are some of the examples or ideas or innovative solutions that are coming out of some of the funds that we've had to create. It's not the industries we are focused on, but we've seen spin-offs for the other sectors getting involved, coming up through our involvement from a totally different perspective. So in the issue of baseline, you're able to collect data, and I assume that's what you're referring to, the types of people who would want to be involved with that sector. We get to understand more about the communities in which you operate. It also has assisting us a lot around that. And if you think about the Social Employment Fund, it's all about us measuring how many, is the stimulus working or not. And I think that's a good example on how we've done in the baseline determination, monitoring and evaluation as such. Yeah.
Thank you, Lwandle. We have 1 minute left, but I did promise to take the last round of questions and comments. So if you'd allow me, it is the last session after all. No, I'm joking, not to disrespect your time, but I just wanted to give an opportunity if there's one last comment or questions before I give our panelists closing remarks. Okay, great. Going, gone. So in closing, I'd just like our panelists to briefly, very briefly, in like a few seconds, to really sum up what would it take for us to build a more inclusive finance ecosystem. for the township SMEs or informal SMEs? What would it take for us? I think the two things that have been very consistent is intentionality and the ecosystem, because no one player can close all the gaps when it comes to financing. So what, in summary, what would it take to build a solution that is sustainable?
I guess from the IDC, an ecosystem approach is what we are prioritizing, be it in a transaction where an investee company is looking for 20,000 rands in working capital to a company who needs a 50 billion rands in working capital. So for us, it's that ecosystem approach, being able, and I'm going to talk here from a financial services sector perspective, being able to assist that company when it comes to pre-feasibility, feasibility, basically going through the journey with them. And I'm seeing a lot of that in South Africa. Our financial services sector is basically being innovative at the moment, and we're all working together to actually try and bring as many people into the mainstream, if you want to call it the mainstream. So an ecosystem approach, partnerships, and of course, access to information in areas where there's none, and ensuring that when that information lands there, it's interpreted in the correct way and people are able to know where to go when they need this information, yeah, and what it means for them, yeah.
Thank you, Lwandle.
So for me, it's the focus. Having started in the green economy 8 years ago, could never have guessed where the renewable energy industry has gone. And for us as a bank, we've said, well, ESG is core to everything we do. Township economy, we've just launched our women and youth proposition. So for us, that is kind of an area we want to focus on, putting resources into it. And I think just understanding what our customers need in those areas. So it's just the deliberate and kind of long-term focus on that, because we don't have all the answers today. But as long as we stick at it, like we've seen in the green economy, I think we will be surprised by what happens in 12 months, in 24 months. So it's just the focus and sticking to our guns and saying, well, we'll be present there. And we don't know everything, but we've got to partner with people that have more insights and bring it all together.
Thank you. Ritu.
So thanks, Abigail, and great comments and insights there. I think what is most important from my perspective and what we've seen in the space, we definitely need to embed processes such as a CFA. So focusing very much on the technical assistance, on building the understanding, on building the capacity of those SMMEs and townships, but then also providing the space to link them up very closely with the financial sector, amongst others. And that's really about it's a trust building, it's some of that knowledge sharing. It's been very interactive, and it's been very deliberate about building the linkages between the two so that they're not two separate worlds. And in that way, really do increase, I think, the capacity and the capability of those SMMEs to grow, because they understand, in this key resource constrained time, where to go, how to position themselves, and how to frame their conversations. But it needs to be something that is built into the system of how South Africa operates. We need to be able to do this for generations, for decades to come, definitely as part of the just transition.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our panelists. Please join me to give them a round of applause. Thank you for the engaging session, and thank you for all your comments and questions. And to the online audience, thank you for joining us as well, and I wish you a pleasant afternoon.